Hey Reclaimed students, welcome back to Youth Group and welcome back to my library. Figured shooting here again today. So today we're going to be going through our third and final lesson in the series Love/Hate. I don't know how many of you guys like going to the mall. I know that they're sort of dying out, but the mall is still one of the places where you can get some grade A people watching in. And it's also where you can go and find like hundreds of different brands smushed so close together and see all of them in just one quick trip down a hall. And I never really thought about it, but it's sort of weird how so many different brands that have different vibes and sort of like, I guess, personalities to them, they're all just chilling there side by side. And now, maybe you've never thought about a brand having a vibe or a personality or reputation, but they really do. Think about it. You know, there's a difference between a Nike store and a Sperry store. And even though they both sell shoes, when you walk past those stores, you instantly know that they are not the same place. And you know, what about places like Urban Outfitters and H&M, which is basically a clothing store that sells almost the exact same clothes to the exact same demographic, but when you walk into either one, they just have a very different vibe, a very different feeling when you walk into them. And here's why I find this really fascinating. You see, companies, they spend billions of dollars each year trying to control their company's brands. That includes things like their look, weirdly enough, their smell, and what they're known for. They hire hundreds of people. They spend billions of dollars trying to shape something that every one of us has, and every one of us, we probably don't spend enough time thinking about. Our reputation. Our reputations, they're made up of all sorts of different things, and they bring out all kinds of assumptions about who we are. So just think about the various groups in your school or just people that you know throughout your life and the assumptions that you made about these people who are part of those groups. Assumptions like every rich kid is blank, or the AP and honor students are fill in the blank. The people who are really into band are, or you know, the kids who vape are fill in the blank. When we think about a group of people, we all have something that comes into our head that we think describes that group of people as a whole. And rarely will we say that out loud, or at least we won't unless we're around someone else who thinks the same way. And you see, we all tend to fill in the blank about other people, to assume that we know what to expect from them right now. And we think that we know what they're capable of and how they'll respond in any situation. In other words, how we fill in the blank now, it determines what we expect from them later. And whether we know the person or not, it doesn't really matter. We know their reputation, or you know, maybe we built one for them ourselves in our own mind based on a single action or a single person in that entire group. And this isn't a teenager thing. This is a human thing. And we all do this. Where do these assumptions come from? Well, I think that they come from a lot of different places, but the following two stand out the most. The first is different experiences that we have. We have experiences of what someone like them did or said to us, and we use those experiences to prejudge what this person's going to be like. And then we have our own insecurities. Sometimes our assumptions, they're formed on our own sin. Sometimes our assumptions about other people, they're actually formed on our own insecurities. You know, the person that we're filling in this blank on, they have something that we wish we had. You know, maybe that person has the starting position on the team, or they have the house that our family just could never afford. And it's annoying to us. You know, we automatically assume the worst about them because they remind us how far we feel from being the best. Our limited experiences, our insecurities, they cause us to fill in the blanks and convince ourselves that we know way more about somebody else than we actually do, that we can literally predict their future. And it's kind of illogical when you think about it. And you see, this can really be a problem if we want to be known for love instead of hate. Because to be honest, we often don't fill in the blank with something nice. And the ironic part is that we absolutely hate when other people do this to us, when they put us into a box. But how do we resist the temptation to do the same thing to others? There's a moment from Jesus' life that it may be able to help us here. See, Jesus, he was in the middle of this tense encounter with some religious leaders of Israel at the time. And these teachers of the law, the Pharisees, they were a big deal in the religious circles. And they had a brand of self-righteousness. They thought that they were set apart, that they were better than the others. So when Jesus came around and he started spending time with people that the religious leaders had branded as sinners, or people who they weren't close to God as they were, things got really tense between them. They actually started to try and catch Jesus off guard with a question that they hoped would prove that he was a phony, that he was fake. And they wanted him to slip up and answer in some way that took away his credibility and made him look bad. During one of these encounters, after some people had gathered to listen to Jesus teach in the temple, there was these religious leaders who caught this woman in an R-rated situation. So they dragged her out in front of Jesus and they wanted to see how he would handle the situation. And I think what unfolds here, it shows a different way to live instead of filling in the blanks about other people's reputations. So let's check it out. In John 8:3-6 it says, as he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in an act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in an act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. Now, see, the text says that the woman was caught in the act. She was literally committing adultery when the leaders found her. And so we can assume that she was already pretty humiliated right here. And the law demanded that people literally threw rocks at her until she died. And so the religious leaders, they wanted to make Jesus choose in front of a crowd of people. Was he going to overlook this woman's obvious sins and choose to ignore the law of Moses, which would take away Jesus' credibility as a teacher and anger the religious leaders? Or would he allow her to be stoned, causing the crowd to turn on him? You see, this was a trap. The leaders knew it was a trap. That's the point. Let's look at what happens next. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his fingers. They kept demanding on an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away, one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. I'm not sure that we can fully understand the tension of this moment. You see, these religious leaders who built up their own brand as appearing better than other people and pointing out the sins of others, they're totally put in their place here. Basically, Jesus is saying, you're quick to point out other people's sins and where they've gone wrong. But what about you? Have you ever gotten it wrong? And then, one by one, these leaders, they realize that their plan has backfired on them. Jesus kindly and lovingly releases the woman who is literally afraid for her life right now and tells her to go in freedom and to live her life differently. So you see, everyone here was guilty of something, both the religious leaders and the woman. And Jesus had a message for both of them. What is possible for your future, it isn't determined by your past. Not if you're a Pharisee and not if you're the woman. Both are guilty and both are free to go. Both have a reputation for being one way and both can leave differently than they arrived. You see, Jesus challenged the woman by saying, go and sin no more. Because no matter her reputation, he believed that change was possible for her. This is such a Jesus thing to do. And it's because he responded in love to everyone in the situation. And it's exactly what you and I should be about too. But isn't it true that oftentimes we're more on brand with the religious leaders than we are with Jesus? Don't we often fill in the blank about other people based on a behavior that they or someone like them did, maybe even just once? Don't we tend to assume that we already know what will happen next in their story because of what has happened before or because what we think that they may have done? The way that Jesus approaches this situation in this story, it teaches us something different. See, this woman who had a brand, a reputation for being bad, who everyone was judging based off of this thing that she did, Jesus saw her as more than that. He believed something was possible in her future, no matter her past. He didn't write a story about who she was because of what she'd been caught doing. He didn't fill in a blank about her, even though he he actually knew everything about her. He saw her as a whole person. And as a as a whole person, he saw her as being deserving of another chance. Jesus, he proves that we're more than the assumptions and the judgments that other people make about us. We're worthy of forgiveness, of grace, and a second chance because of his love for us. And we can extend that same forgiveness, that same grace and love to others too. What if this is the approach that you and I took when we started to form our opinions about other people? What if instead of filling in the blanks with assumptions and judgments, we chose to believe that anyone could radically change? What if we believe that anyone could surprise us and be far better than we think they are? What if we chose to let love fill in the blank? This would change the way that not only that we think about people, but also how we treat people, wouldn't it? And not only that, this would also change a lot about the way that we think about ourselves as well. We may end up realizing that, look, we're not as terrible as other people made us feel, or we're not as perfect as we may think. There's something that's both encouraging and humbling about Jesus' approach, because it puts all of us on the same level as people that God loves and as people that Jesus died to forgive and set free, not just the sum total of our actions. In other words, when we fill in the blank with judgment or hate, we're only seeing part of the person, their actions, whether they did wrong or something that we just didn't like. But when we fill in the blank with love, we're seeing them as another human being. We're seeing them as more than what they have or haven't done, but as individuals, as peoples whose story isn't over, whose stories may not even be written yet. So when you're in a situation where the opportunity to start making assumptions and judgments about other people start flying at you, take a step towards a new approach. So the first thing I want you to do when this happens is to stop and think about how others have filled in the blank about you. So when you're in a situation where you're about to start making an assumption about someone else based on an action or something like that, I want you to stop. And I want you to think about your own life and how people may have underestimated you and how they judged you. Think about how you felt in that moment going, you don't know the true me, you're just viewing this small portion of me. And remember that you have the opportunity to change that on the other side, and also remember that Jesus' forgiveness, it brought you to the place where you are now. It brought you to a better place. And then treat the people the way that Jesus treated you, with grace and with love, and assuming that their best days are ahead of them. And the next thing I want you to do is to think about someone who you've wrongly filled in the blank about. Who is someone who you think you know, but you don't actually know them? Who have you filled in the blank about in a negative way without learning about their story? What if you chose to fill in those blanks the way that Jesus would, with compassion? What if we chose to let love fill in the blank when we meet someone new? What if we chose to let love fill in the blank for what we think about someone now and what we expect from them in their future? When we choose to follow Jesus' examples and take these steps, we're choosing to let love fill in the blank, instead of our quick, shallow assumptions and judgments about who they are and who they're gonna be. We could be the people who let love fill in the blank about others. And when we do this, we will be the people who are known for our love for others, just like Jesus was, and just like Jesus intended for his people to be. All right, everyone, that wraps up this series of love and hate. And I hope that throughout this 3-week series, we've learned to be more of the people who choose to love others. All right, I'll see you on the chat. Peace.